Hello and welcome to the Curiosity and Consciousness podcast. The intention of this podcast is to open your mind, get curious about yourself and connect to the power you hold within. I am your host, Karen Maloney, an inside-out coach, helping you to believe in yourself and manifest your desires. Check out the podcast, available on all platforms, and go to my website, www.karenmaloney.com for all info. Welcome everybody. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. It's me, Karen Maloney, and I have another incredible conversation for you this week. And for me, this was like a real wow moment to speak to this week's guest, who is Chris Wark. And back in the day, after I lost my dad to cancer in 2011, when I went on my deep dive learning and studying and researching more about cancer after he passed away, Chris was one of the people that I came across, and he was one of the main people that I came across at the time that was speaking out about cancer, the possibility of healing, of curing yourself, of nutrition, of diet. And yeah, so it's just such an incredible honor for me to connect with him in this conversation and in this series, and I'm sure you will get a lot from it. But first, let me introduce him. Chris Wark is a young adult cancer survivor, best-selling author and patient advocate. Chris was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer in 2003 at just 26 years old. After surgery, Chris made the decision to go against his doctor's advice, opted out of chemotherapy, and chose to use nutrition and natural therapies to heal. 6 years later, in 2010, Chris began sharing his story of faith, courage, and determination, and his message of hope that chronic diseases like cancer can be prevented and reversed with a radical transformation of diet and lifestyle. In the last decade, Chris has become one of the most well-known cancer survivors on the planet and reaches millions of people per year as a blogger, podcaster, speaker, and global health coach through his books, social media, and his website, chrisbeatcancer.com. Again, I really enjoyed connecting with Chris, and there's a lot in this conversation as well, slightly longer than the average episodes as well. We just kept talking, but Chris shares about his story, and he shares about how he moved through the fear and found faith in what was happening to him, and he doesn't consider himself lucky to have overcome cancer, but this piece that he talks about of personal responsibility, that maybe if somehow the choices he made led to his disease in the first place, well, then he could maybe contribute to his wellness as well. And that's exactly what he talks about, how the choices he made, and like many people he has interviewed who have overcome and survived cancer, there are many common threads of what they did in order to reverse it and to come back to full health. So he doesn't think it was luck. It was actually through his own choices and personal responsibility and willingness to change and radically change his diet and lifestyle that led to his healing. He talks about how he prayed for guidance from God when he decided not to go for chemotherapy. And next thing, a book came across his path, which ultimately led him down the path of nutrition and overdosing on nutrition, as he calls it. He also talks about some of the most common risk factors for cancer and the biggest causes of cancer in today's world. He shares how he handed his fear over to God and chose faith instead. And he also shared how important forgiveness is on the healing path. And, ultimately what Chris is sharing and what his work is all about is the message of hope, of possibility, that cancer can be overcome. You can survive. He calls it a catalyst, an incredible catalyst for change. And he talks about how your life can be better after cancer than it was before, even though it feels like your life can be over, but it can be better. And that's his ultimate message. No matter what path you choose to take, ultimately healing comes from within the body itself, and he shares how people can support themselves in that journey as well. So there's lots in this conversation, and Chris on his website also has 20 questions for your oncologist that anyone can download, whether you're going conventional or complementary or an integrative approach. There are 20 questions there for your oncologist that he has free available to everyone. Chris has his books, which are Chris Beat Cancer, a comprehensive plan for healing naturally. Beat Cancer Daily, 365 days of inspiration, encouragement and action steps to survive and thrive. And Beat Cancer Kitchen, deliciously simple plant-based anti-cancer recipes. But all information is available on his website and his YouTube channel, which has over 16 million views, his podcast, his Facebook and Instagram, where he has a huge following and shares a huge amount of information as well. All is available from his website, chrisbeatcancer.com. But as always as well, I will have all the links to all his work and books and socials on my website, karenmaloney.com, and click the podcast section. Enjoy. Welcome, Chris Wark. And first of all, I'm so excited and thank you for joining as well. I came across you many years ago and your story and your work, and it's just a privilege to connect with you today and have you join this series as well. So first of all, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And, like we were just chatting about there before we started recording, sometimes this conversation is not for everyone to hear. It can be jarring, it can be triggering, but I think it's important and you think it's important and why you do all you do. So please just introduce yourself and share a little bit on your background, first of all.
Sure. Well, my name is Chris Wark. I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer when I was 26 years old. Mm-hmm. And this was just a few days before Christmas, December 2003. Wow. Spoiler alert, I did not die. I survived and thrived. And my story is unique, as is everyone's. But the choices that I made to help myself during that really difficult time of disease are the reason that I'm still alive. And what I have learned over almost 20 years now since my diagnosis is that I was not lucky. The things that I chose to do are the same things that every person I've ever met who has healed advanced cancer against the odds also did. We all did the same things basically to help ourselves survive. And the common threads, and I've interviewed, dozens and dozens of people who've healed just like me on Chris Beat Cancer podcast and the website and all that. And if you dig in and you listen to my story, I want to encourage you to listen to more healing stories because you will see the common threads. And we'll talk about some of them in this interview. But the most important, I think, first principle is personal responsibility. And that's this understanding or realization that you are where you are in life as a result of the decisions that you've made, by and large. We are rarely victims of our own circumstance. Usually our circumstances are the result of our decisions, right? Sometimes other people can victimize us. That happens. But generally in life, most of what's happening in your life is the result of your decisions. And so when I was diagnosed, I had a revelation that the way I was living was killing me. And I had been having abdominal pain for the better part of a year, eventually had several doctor's appointments, had a colonoscopy. Again, at 26, I mean, that's the last thing on your mind. It's the last thing on the doctor's mind. But, they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. So, and while I was having these abdominal pains, so they did a colonoscopy. And then when I woke up from that procedure, they said, yeah, you've got a golf ball sized tumor in your colon. And we sent a biopsy to the lab and we'll let you know. And a day or so later, I got a call and, yeah, you've got colon cancer. So big shock, obviously, for anybody at any age, especially for a young person. I feel like it's, I felt like I'm just getting started.
Mm.
You know,
Well,
at
yeah.
26, I mean, I had only been out of college for 2 years because it took me 6 years to graduate college as an undergrad because I just wasted a lot of time.
You're having too much fun.
Yeah, too much fun and didn't know what I wanted to do and took the
Mm-hmm.
semester off and, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm like, I'm just getting going into
Mm.
adulthood here. Right. And I'd been married for 2 years, out of college for 2 years, married for 2 years. And it was like, this is it. Like all of that, everything I've worked for and, all my hopes and dreams and all that are just shattered.
Mm.
Cancer is just going to cut my life short. And that's the Chris Wark story. And, you know, it was terrible, right? It was just a
Mm-hmm.
terrible notion that this was it for me. And I was rushed into surgery, and this is very common.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that people with cancer, excuse me, people that have not gone through cancer don't understand. But as soon as you get a diagnosis, they are going to rush you into treatment. They may want to start surgery within a couple days, or have surgery. They may want to start chemo within a couple days or radiation. You have so little time to read and research and think about your life, and it's just fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's this fear and urgency, and this is what they use to coerce patients into saying yes to treatments that are harmful and destructive and brutal, and in many cases don't cure your cancer, especially if you're stage 3 or 4. I was stage 3, so I had the surgery. A couple things happened in the hospital. The first meal they served me was a sloppy Joe, which is, I guess, an American food. Do they do
Mm-hmm.
sloppy joes over there?
Not in Ireland. Well, I'm Irish. Not in Ireland. Mexico, they probably have something similar. But I mean, there's not great nutrition in hospitals. Full stop.
Yeah, full stop. Right. So it's just really horrible hospital food. So the sloppy Joe, for anyone that doesn't know what a sloppy Joe is, it's like they basically take ground beef and they stew it in like a
Mm.
tomato sauce. So it's like a really sloppy ground beef kind of stew. And then they ladle it onto a burger bun. Right. And that's why it's called the sloppy Joe, because it's messy. It's this
Mm-hmm.
messy ground beef. Hopefully it's beef. Who knows? Right.
Who knows?
Ground meat concoction slopped on a burger bun. And it's the kind of thing that they would serve in the military, or
Mm.
in prison. You know what I'm saying? This is like
Mm-hmm.
prison food, and we're serving it to the sick people. so,
In hospitals, yes.
so that was a surprise. That I was just, my eyes were opened, like, wow, they really don't care about nutrition in the hospital. And the other thing that happened that was, worth retelling is the day I was told I could go home, my surgeon came in and we were having a conversation, and I just happened to say, hey, is there any food I need to avoid? Because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, they just cut out a third of my large intestine. Like everything you eat is
Mm-hmm.
going to pass through this
Through there.
area that's stitched up, and is hot sauce going to like melt my stitches, or, you know what I mean? I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. Valid
And
questions.
right. And what am I allowed to eat? What can I not eat? His answer was, no, just don't lift anything heavier than a beer. So that was it. Again, another little red flag that the healthcare industry has no regard for actual healthy eating, right? And nutrition. They just, they don't think it matters. Eat whatever you
Mm-hmm.
want. And I'm an instinctive person. I'm also a very logical person, a rational person. I'm definitely not the smartest person I've ever met, but I'm a thinker. you know,
Mm-hmm.
I really do think about things. And if something doesn't make sense to me, I will think about it,
Yeah.
and try to understand why it doesn't make sense and try to find a solution that does. So
Mm-hmm.
I go home and I'm recovering from surgery and I'm weaning myself off the pain medication. And as I sobered up, and by the way, I was told I would need 9 to 12 months of chemotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
So as I sobered up, I started thinking about my life and my future and what chemotherapy would do to me and what I would become. And I had seen cancer patients out in the world. I had seen what chemo does to humans. And it's alarming, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's shocking, it's disturbing. Like when you see another person in this advanced cancer state and they've been treated with chemo for years, and it just, it just is so troubling to see another person
Mm-hmm.
in that state. And so, yeah, I mean, I had those images in my mind, and I'm like, that's me. Like, this is my future. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't like that, right? I didn't want to become that. I didn't know what else to do. And I just prayed about it. My wife and I are Christians. And I just said, God, if there's another way besides chemotherapy, please show me. And it was a prayer of desperation, but also a prayer of faith. I believed that he would do something. I believed that he was going to supply all of my needs, that he would provide a way for me, whatever that was. And, there's nothing like a life-threatening illness to really bring you closer to God. Okay.
Yeah.
As they say, there's no atheists in the foxhole. And so, yeah. And I already believed in God, so this just really forced me to go deep in my faith and trust in a way I never had before. Because when you have cancer, it's like, oh, I can't just fix this, like I need some divine help. I need some real help. And, 2 days later, I got a book that was sent to me from a man who was a friend of my dad's who lived in Alaska. And he was a business client and buddy of my dad. I'm in Tennessee. And this book was called God's Way to Ultimate Health, written by George Malcolmus. And George's backstory was he was a pastor who found out he had colon cancer back in like 1976 or around that time. And he had seen a number of church members go through cancer treatment and suffer and die, including his mother. And then he gets this diagnosis. And then he decided, he happened to have a friend who said, look, you need to go back to the Garden of Eden. You need to eat a diet that's exclusively raw fruits and vegetables. And you need to get a juicer. You need to start drinking carrot juice every day. And as ridiculous as that sounds, that's what he did. And within a year, his body had healed. He was 100% healthy, totally fine. And his story was so just inspiring to me. I was like, wait a minute, if this guy healed, maybe I can heal, right? He had colon cancer. I have colon cancer, right? We're both humans, like our bodies work the same. And maybe cancer can be healed, if your body created it, maybe it can heal it. So the wheels are turning, And of course, he was making the case that was true. And he was also making the case that the reason so many of us are sick was because of our diet and lifestyle and environmental factors. Well, turns out there's been a lot of published research on this. And depending on whose study you read, the most, there's conservative opinions and liberal opinions on, what percentage of cancers are caused by diet, lifestyle, and environment. But some opinions are that it's 90% plus are caused by diet, lifestyle, and environment. And only 2 to 3, 5% of cancers are truly genetic. Even if you have a predisposition like the BRCA gene or Lynch, your choices affect the gene expression. So your choices can turn on cancer-promoting genes or turn them off. And that was so empowering, right, for me to realize this. I learned some of that stuff later, but just this idea that, wait a minute, maybe I can help myself heal. There's things I can do. It gave me my power back.
Yeah.
And I realized I don't have to be a victim of disease. And this is the biggest problem in medicine is victimhood. And victimhood is perpetuated by doctors. Not all doctors are bad, and I'm not throwing them all under the bus. But generally speaking, doctors are trained to victimize their patients. It sounds insidious and sinister, and I'm not implying that. But the doctors are told that all these chronic diseases, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, multiple sclerosis, autoimmune disease, all these chronic diseases that are at epidemic levels are incurable, right? There's medicines for them, which are pharmaceuticals, and you give the patients these pharmaceuticals if they have this disease. And in med school, they have to memorize all the diseases and all the drugs for the diseases. Then you get to be a doctor of internal medicine, right? Which means you're just a doctor of drugs.
Managing symptoms.
Right. And you're just helping people manage their symptoms, helping people stay vertically ill. And when I say vertically ill, that means you can get out of bed. You can function. Horizontally ill means, right, you're bedridden. So vertical illness is basically the norm, right? We've got millions of people walking around, going to work, living their lives in a state of illness. And they're just functioning, and pharmaceuticals are helping them function, but they're not well. So doctors tell patients there's nothing you did, right? There's nothing you did to cause your diabetes or cancer, right? There's nothing you did. Therefore, there's also nothing you can do to help yourself, right? And they don't say it that specifically, but that's the underlying message, right? And with cancer, it's like, oh no, it's not your diet. No, you don't need to take supplements. That won't help. No, it's not stress. We know it's none of those things.
Mm.
It's either bad genes, right? Or you're just unlucky. Bad luck or bad genes. This victimizes the patient. And so then they go home. And by the way, before they go home, the message is the only thing you can do to help yourself is show up for treatment, right? This is your only hope. Right? Surgery, chemo, radiation, maybe some a clinical trial, immunotherapy, experimental drugs. This is your only hope. And so the patient goes home and they're like, well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do what my doctor says. And I've got the best doctor. Patients love to brag about how they have the best doctor. It's like this point of pride. It's weird. It's like a status thing. Oh, I've got the best doctors. They're amazing. My doctor's amazing. I hear this all the time. I'm like, really, your doctor isn't amazing because most of their patients are dead, or dying. They're
Mm-hmm.
not. They cast a spell over you and you're mixed up. But they go home and they say, well, I don't need to change. My doctor said it's not my diet. Right? And they get this attitude of superiority. It's not diet. Oh, it's nothing I did. My doctor told me I can drink Diet Cokes. It's fine. Right? The
Mm.
nutritionist at the cancer center said I can drink Diet Coke. Why would I stop drinking Diet Coke? Like, they didn't tell me I need to change my diet, so I'm not going to change my diet. So these are the kind of things that cancer patients start to believe. And the problem is they're not getting well. They just get sicker and sicker and sicker for the most part. And unless the cancer's caught really early, and then the survival's good. But probably the most damning statistic in all of cancerdom is the fact that the death rate from cancer in the last 60 years has only come down about 5%
Mm.
across, if you average all the cancers together. I mean,
Right.
that's dismal. Since chemo really started being used in a big way in the 60s, 1960s, yeah, we've only reduced the overall death rate by about 5%. So like there's some cancers that made big strides with childhood leukemia, lymphomas, testicular cancer. The 10-year survival is 90% or more.
Mm.
That's great. But for solid tumor cancers, breast, colon, liver, lung, ovarian, cervical, the death rate has largely not changed much.
Mm.
And they, instead of really looking at the death rate, they talk about 5-year survival, and they sort of slice up these statistics to try to make the treatments look better by using statistics like disease-free survival, like how long did they live before the cancer came back. And they use these really, in my opinion, just pathetic measurements of
Parameters,
success,
yeah.
right? They call that a success. Oh, well, they lived an extra 3 months, right? Compared to the last drug. This new drug
Yeah.
is, they live 3 months longer than the old drug. The old drug, they only lived typically, 6 months. Now they're living 9 months before they die.
Mm.
So that's a huge improvement in survival. This is the way they talk, right? In that industry. And they act
Yeah.
like they're heroes, right? For keeping someone alive for an extra 3 months. And they're not really living, they're suffering and they're sick, and it's like living
Yeah.
hell,
What's the
going through those
quality of life?
treatments. So, I talk about this in great detail in my first book, which is called Chris Beat Cancer, which I tell my story, but also there's a deep dive, multi-chapter deep dive into the problems with the medical, pharmaceutical, and cancer industries, and they're just corrupt. There's good
Mm.
people in those industries, but they're in a corrupt system,
Corrupt system, yeah.
and that system is designed to generate maximum profits. And it doesn't matter if you get well or not. It doesn't matter if you live or die.
Which, is if someone is hearing that or kind of taking that in again for the first time, it's like, it's a hard one to take, but the more you open up, the more you just kind of be less reactionary and be open minded and be willing to explore and see what truths might be there, the more it's kind of obvious that, well, it makes sense that sick people make money. And if people are getting better, the money's not there. And again, like you say, I don't blame the people, it's the system. And if, with all the advances and everything, if we're still not getting better and if we're sicker than ever, how is that a system that works? So much of what you shared there as well. And I just remembered even my dad, like the minute that diagnosis comes in, the urgency, the fear, the panic. I remember even one day he said to me, he's like, Karen, I've heard about carrot juice and different things, but he felt he had zero time. It's just that idea of just get in the surgery, chemo, radiation, like he did it all. And, that's, like you mentioned as well, the time, for most people, you do have time. you do have a couple of
Yes.
days, a couple of weeks to research, to take a pause, to process the initial shock and the overwhelm and the fear before making a decision. But that comes back as well to, that personal responsibility piece you mentioned at the start as well. And that can be jarring as well, to realize it's not necessarily, in the way I look at things, it's we have so much, we don't know our own power. And if it is the truth that there is a part of me that is creating all of my reality, even if I'm creating things I don't want and things that are horrible, but like you mentioned as well, that also means I can be empowered and I can make so many changes to then create a different reality for myself. And this idea of epigenetics and diet and lifestyle and the environment that we put ourselves and our cells in, it's kind of like, why not explore it? And this is something I don't understand when it comes to cancer. People are so quick to dismiss everything and anything, bar what the doctor says, where it's like, well, if you have a choice anyway, or if you can do certain things for yourself, why not try them? Why not try them if they're natural? And I know, like you said, you prayed for a different route. And when you decided to opt out of the chemo, how was that for you? Like, did you feel a lot of fear, or did you feel guided? Did you feel like, okay, this is the right decision? Or what was coming up for you at that time?
Every day was fear. Every day in the cancer journey, you're struggling with fear. And it's not all day, every day, because you get busy and distracted. And
Mm,
there are these stretches of time, these like wonderful stretches of time where you forget you have cancer
yeah.
because you're busy doing something, right? You're watching a movie or you're working or right, where you're with friends and you forget you have cancer. But then inevitably you're reminded, and then here comes the fear,
Mm,
that sinking feeling, that just pit of your stomach, cold sweat, fear. And like, what's going to happen to me? Am I going to die? Am I going
mm,
to get worse? Am I going to suffer? And so I had to learn very quickly to give my fear to God. It's like, and anytime the fear would creep in, I would just stop right in that moment and say, okay, God, I trust you. I'm just giving you my fear, right? I
mm.
trust you. I'm not going to be afraid. I'm not going to let fear, worry, and anxiety steal my joy. So that was huge. And it wasn't like I just prayed that one time. This was every day,
Every time.
multiple times per day. I was just interrupting the fear with faith. And by the way, earlier I mentioned I read this book, right, about the raw food diet and
Mm-hmm.
juicing, and I just knew that was the answer to my prayer, right? I prayed,
Yeah.
this book showed up. I'm like, this is it. This is what I'm
Yeah.
doing. So I was so full of faith and encouragement and enthusiasm to do that. And I did not deliberate about it. I didn't
Mm,
ask around. Okay. I just said, I'm doing it. I'm doing this. I went to the grocery store. Filled up the cart with organic fruits and vegetables. I bought a juicer, bought a big bag of carrots, and like, here we go. Like,
mm-hmm.
I'm doing this. And meanwhile, what I was doing, family members learned quickly what I had decided to do. And my mom was a big supporter. She'd always been into natural health and had tons of books about healing
Mm-hmm.
naturally, which she'd never been sick, but she just had loved
It's
loved
interested.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, loved to read and research and learn, and had always been a health and wellness enthusiast. So she had this wonderful library of books written, from starting back in the '60s and even earlier, but Paul Bragg's books and Pablo Areola and just all these incredible books. So that was an answer to prayer and a miracle, really, that she had all these books for me, because information was kind of hard to come by at that time. There was nothing on the internet that was helpful, and no social media. There was no Facebook, no
Yeah.
YouTube. In
Mm-hmm.
2004, there was January 2004 when I was getting started.
Mm.
So I went from book to book to book and was listening to some audio cassettes and some VHS tapes and stuff, like just anything I could find that was not
Anything, yeah.
healing. Yeah.
And it's
So
funny though, the information was always still there.
it was there. Yeah, it was
Mm.
there. It just was harder to find.
Yeah.
And what I did find, it all kept pointing me back to the same method,
Mm.
right? It all kept pointing back. Organic, all fruits and vegetables, mostly raw, exercise, stress reduction, detoxification, forgiveness, living in harmony with nature, all these universal, timeless principles of holistic health
Mm.
were, they kept being reinforced. Every book I found, every resource. I mean, there was, of course, there's little differences of opinion about
Mm-hmm.
minor things from book to book, but the major themes were, were supported. And so that gave me a lot of encouragement as I went through. But I had family members that definitely thought I'd lost my mind, told me I was being
Mhm.
stubborn, told me, you've got to do what the doctor says.
Mm.
Alternative therapies don't work. I know somebody that tried them and died. I heard all this kind of stuff.
Mm.
And that produced a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, there's more fear I got to give to God. Here we go. And it was hard in the beginning because I felt so alone,
Mm.
so alone. When you do what the doctor says, when you follow the masses, everybody loves you and supports you, right? People are making t-shirts and baking cakes and raising money for you and like taking you to your appointments and bringing you food and gifts and flowers. Like
Mm.
everybody's just loving on you, and it's great. But as soon as you say, well, I'm not going to do that, everybody's gone. It's
Mm.
just like, crickets. Like, where are all my friends? Where's my family? Where's the support? Like, nobody agrees with what I'm
Mm.
doing. So nobody wants anything to do with me, and that makes it extra hard. And I just
Yeah.
realized, look, I want to live so bad that I'm willing to do this alone.
Mm.
I'm willing to, I'm going to have to, I guess I'm going to have to do it alone.
Yeah.
And I just can't worry about what anybody else thinks. I want to live, and I'm going to do everything in my power to help myself survive.
Yeah.
So, so that was, and by the way, it got better. People
Mm-hmm.
around me came around over time. So you have that to look forward to. If people don't understand you right now, it's okay. Like, eventually
Okay.
they will.
Mm.
Um, but I found a naturopathic doctor. He connected me with an integrative oncologist,
Mm.
and I slowly assembled a little support system, you know, and that was tremendously helpful. Just to have a few people
Mm.
that said, we understand what you're doing. We're here to support you, right? We're not here to
Amazing.
bully
Yeah.
you into treatment or tell you you're stupid or wrong or whatever, ignorant or something. And
Yeah.
I did go see a conventional oncologist, and he treated my wife and I so badly, was so rude and arrogant and condescending. We never went back to him. And so, uh, these parts of my story are important because it's the same thing that every cancer patient has to
Mm.
deal with. Like, you have to deal with the fear and the emotions and the support. And I said it earlier, but I realized the way I was living was killing me. And so I also realized, if I contributed to my illness, then maybe I can contribute to my wellness, right?
Yeah.
Maybe this is my fault. And if it's my fault, I'm okay with that. And if it's my fault, that actually is good news, because that means maybe I can help myself out of this problem.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not it's your fault, does it matter? No,
Mm.
because whether you caused the problem or not, guess what? It's your problem now,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? And if you don't take ownership of the problem, and you're abdicating all of your power, and you're putting all of your faith, hope, and trust in another person,
Mm.
a doctor, to save you, you may be disappointed.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the reality of medicine is doctors, they're seeing 40, 50, 60 patients a day, right? Do you think they're even going to remember your name if you bumped into them at the grocery store?
Mm.
Probably not, you know? Not
Yeah.
until you've seen them 5 or 10 times, then maybe they'll remember your name.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get the kind of care that you think you are, and no one will take better care of you than you if
Exactly.
you decide to do it.
If you decide to do it. And that's so powerful because, again, no matter what happens, no matter what shows up, we are never helpless. Never, ever, ever. I mean, we can be, and we can choose to fall into victimhood, and that's fine. All emotions are welcome. But it's like you're saying, it's finding, and I think it's really important as well, finding a desire, finding that burning passion to want to live as well. Because, like you say, I think sometimes without that, you won't search all avenues, or you may, just accept what's come your way, and miss out on that piece of real fight, even though I think truly everyone does put up a fight as well and gives it their best. But the way that you mentioned as well, that the ways that you were living, contributed to your cancer diagnosis. And, well, first of all, if you just explain some of those ways, I think they're pretty obvious. But then there's always this question as well about these people who were so seemingly picture perfect health. They never smoked, they exercised, they never drank. But what happened then? So, what's your understanding of what happens in those cases as well?
Yeah. And before I answer that question, I want to make sure that your audience knows I have a free resource for cancer patients. It's called 20 Questions for Your
Mm.
Oncologist. And if you
I'll
go to
link it.
chrisbeatcancer.com, there's a link to that on every page of my website. It's easy to
Hmm.
find.
Yeah.
And that will empower you with the questions that you absolutely need to ask your doctor before you start treatment.
Mm.
If you've already started treatment, it's okay. You need to bring those questions in anyway and ask them, because most patients do not ask the right questions. Their doctor doesn't tell them enough information, and they just use fear to scare them into saying yes to treatment. And
Mm-hmm.
you cannot make an informed decision about your life and your health and your future if you don't ask the right questions. You
Mm.
don't have all the information. So I hope folks listening, if that applies to you, go to chrisbeatcancer.com, download the 20 questions for your oncologist guide, and go through it, and then take those questions that are applicable to you and your situation to your doctor.
Mm.
Okay, so sorry, remind me, what was your question?
Eh,
Causes of cancer. Yeah, and why people get cancer. Well, there are so many known causes.
mm.
Okay, the number one cause, as I said, 90% of cancers roughly are diet, lifestyle, environment. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so diet, the Western diet, that's a diet that is high in animal protein, sugar, salt, fat, and oil, processed food, junk food. Okay. This is the Western diet. It's very different than a diet that is consumed in many other countries in the world that is predominantly plant based and not animal based. Even in Mexico, the rates of cancer are half of the rates of the US,
Mm.
just south of the border.
Yeah.
And the diet and lifestyle choices make a huge difference on cancer rates. So we eat too much animal protein, and animal protein fuels cancer growth in a number of ways. So that's number one. Eating animals 3 times a day is excessive. And we've been conditioned to think, I need protein, 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 protein in every meal. I need protein between my meals. I need a protein bar. I need a protein shake. Protein fuels cancer growth. Like, we're eating too much of it. You need protein, too much is bad. So that's number one. And that, when I say protein, I'm talking about animal flesh, and I'm also talking about dairy, right? I'm talking about cheese and yogurt and milk, and I'm talking about eggs, right? Food from animals. And yeah, the processed sugar and the refined foods and the fast foods, yes, they're all toxic. They're not healthy. Okay. You can survive on them, but you cannot thrive on them. And over time, you will develop chronic diseases from that diet. Okay. The Western diet. Number two is lifestyle. Well, smoking is the number one cause of cancer, period. Alcohol, major cause of cancer. The number two cause of cancer is obesity. Well, that plays back into diet, doesn't it? Obesity is the second leading cause of cancer. This is not something I made up. This is from all the major cancer research organizations in the world. They all agree smoking is the number one cause, obesity is number two. So, obesity comes from eating too much food, right? And not exercising, being sedentary. Those are the two contributing factors to weight gain. And we just eat too much, right? We eat too much food. There's food everywhere. It's a blessing to have food
Mm-hmm.
every right? Easy access to food. Your
Mm-hmm.
ancestors did not
Yeah.
have easy access to food, and countries, poorer countries, do not have easy access to food,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's millions and millions of people in the world that live in food scarcity, and they actually have lower rates of cancer because of it,
Mm-hmm.
not overeating. So those are some lifestyle factors, and drug use causes cancer. There's If you watch in the U.S., if you watch television, which you really shouldn't because it's largely a not useful
It's a
to your,
fair programming machine.
yeah, it's just a bunch of programming and distractions. But if you watch television, you will see the drug commercials, and at the end of a lot of drug commercials, they will tell you this drug may increase the risk of certain types of cancer, or this
Mm-hmm.
drug is known to increase the risk of lymphoma, or whatever. There's so many drugs that increase your cancer risk.
Mm-hmm.
And so the legal drugs can do it, illegal drugs can do it, and so that's the lifestyle piece, and then the environmental piece is not hard to explain. There is a lot of toxic stuff in our world. There's a lot of toxic chemical pollutants that
Mm-hmm.
manufacturers have pumped into the air and dumped into the rivers and lakes and streams, and so environmental pollution is a major cause as well. And environmental pollution, cancers, that's not the kind of cancer that you would say, this is my fault, right? But the diet and lifestyle, those are the choices you made, right? Every time you eat, you're choosing what you put in your mouth, right? You're choosing to drink. You're choosing to smoke. So you're choosing to exercise or not. So these are your choices, and your choices have consequences, good
Mm-hmm.
or bad.
Yeah.
And so just having that, again, that realization that, you know what, my choices have led me to this point in my life, and I'm going to make different choices. I'm going to get on a different path, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get on a healthy path, a super hardcore healthy path. That was my decision.
Yeah.
So when someone says like, why'd I get cancer? I was super healthy. If I examine their life, I'll say, well, no, you weren't, right? You can be fit, you can look good and be
Mm-hmm.
attractive and fit and be very unhealthy, be a ticking time bomb on the inside. And we see that a lot with people who are athletic and into fitness, and they're taking all kinds of exercise related supplements. They're eating way too much animal protein. They're stressing their body to the max, and they're over exercising, and yeah, they're just
Mm-hmm.
a ticking time bomb. So
Yeah.
health and fitness are not synonymous. You can be extremely fit if you train and work out, and not necessarily healthy
Yeah.
metabolically, and not have a strong immune system. And your immune system is the key. This is the key to healing disease, whether it's infectious or chronic.
Mm.
Having a strong immune system is the key. And what we saw in the last 2 years was this, so many lies, but one of the
Mm.
big lies and the big misconceptions or misunderstandings is that every person is walking around with the same immune system,
Mm.
that we all have the same level of immunity, and therefore we all need the same intervention, right? That we all have weak immune systems, we all need a drug. That's false. Your diet and lifestyle choices impact the health and strength of your immune system.
Yeah.
And so the older you are, the more overweight you are. If you have other chronic health problems, the weaker your immune system will be, and the more vulnerable you will be to infection or other multiple chronic diseases. So just understanding that the choices you make impact the health of your immune system
Mm.
is huge, and food plays a huge role in this. So
Yeah.
there are so many incredible anti-cancer nutrients: vitamins, minerals, enzymes, antioxidants, fiber, water,
Mm.
probiotics, prebiotics, and specific cancer killing compounds in fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
There's so many. I talk about them in my book, in my course. It's called Square One. And the thing is, you don't even have to know all the science, because in the beginning, when I was getting well, I didn't know any science, zero.
Yeah.
I just ate the food,
Yeah.
right? I got the benefit without the knowledge, right? It's like you don't have
Mm-hmm.
to know how a car works to get the
Yeah.
benefit of a car. You just have to learn how to drive it, right? You don't have to
Mm-hmm.
understand internal combustion. And so, the other point that I'd like to make along these lines is that, for the skeptics or the doubters, it's like, how many people have to climb Mount Everest before you believe it's possible? How many people have to run a 4-minute mile before you believe it's possible?
Mm-hmm.
One person, right? If one person does it, generally you would believe it's possible. And we've had thousands and tens of thousands. I mean, countless people have healed advanced cancers
Yeah.
against the odds with a natural or holistic approach. And yet there are still so many people who don't believe it. It's
Yeah.
weird.
It is
Right?
weird.
It's just weird. And I've interviewed people who've healed all types and stages of cancer. Some of them healed with no medical intervention,
Mm.
right? I had surgery, so some people would try to say, well, surgery cured your cancer. That's fine. You can believe that if you want. My doctors at the time told me it wouldn't. But I've interviewed people who've healed cancer with no surgery,
Mm-hmm.
no chemo, no radiation, right? I've interviewed people who've healed cancer after surgery, radiation, and chemo failed, right? They did all the treatments and the
Mm.
cancer came back, and then they were able to heal it. That's harder, right? But
Yeah.
also more remarkable and more incredible. So my message here is one of hope. Like, you can heal, you can get
Mm.
well. And if you really want to get well, you've got to have the beat cancer mindset, which means taking full responsibility for your life and your health. You have to be very clear and make a decision that you want to live.
Mm.
You have to believe that healing is possible. And hopefully, if you watch these interviews that I've done with other survivors, your belief will strengthen.
Mm-hmm.
It's like every time you see someone accomplish something, you believe in it more and more,
Yeah.
right? Like one person climbed Mount Everest. Oh, now two, now 10, now thousands, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, it's possible. Same with healing. That's why I continue to interview people who've healed, right?
Yeah.
Just the more stories we can share, the stronger the case.
Yeah.
So believing that it's possible and then being willing to change your whole life, right? This is the
Yes.
thing. You've got to be willing to let go of your bad habits, to change what you're eating, to change everything about your life, to change your relationships in some cases, to
Mm,
forgive the people who have hurt you. Every person who has ever hurt you, you have to forgive them
mm,
because stress is really a secret underlying cause of most chronic disease.
mm,
See, stress is this sort of insidious and largely not understood contributor to disease, and it falls under the lifestyle
yeah.
category. And what happens is when you're carrying anger and bitterness and resentment towards people, or you're wrapped up in worry, fear, and anxiety, or you're constantly entertaining jealousy and envy or insecurities, if you're carrying guilt and shame, everything I just listed, these are all negative emotions, right?
Mm,
Negative mental and emotional states are caused by anger, fear, worry, guilt, shame, right? Well, all of those produce stress, not just in your mind, but in your
mhm,
body. So when you're angry, your body responds. It starts pumping adrenaline and cortisol. These hormones suppress your immune system
mm,
and promote inflammation. And so when you go day in, day out with all this grinding stress of life, not to mention, work stress, family stress,
mhm.
relationship problems, money problems, right? All of these problems are your problems, right? Even though we tend to compartmentalize, they all have one thing in common. They're your
Mhm.
problems, right?
Common
They're on your
denominator.
shoulders. Yeah, common denominator. That's right. They're on your shoulders. And so your subconscious mind knows about all your problems all the time. It's aware of all your problems all the time.
Mm,
That's what your subconscious mind. And so that creates this inner state of stress. And this is why people have panic attacks, because they have a bunch of problems, right, in their life, past and present, and also worrying about future problems that may never
mm,
happen. So forgiveness is one of the most powerful things you can do, because the anger and bitterness and resentment that you're holding on to from people who've hurt you in your past are keeping you in a state of stress, and they're keeping you in a state of immunosuppression and inflammation. And that is the most pro-cancerous state.
mm.
Inflammation and immunosuppression. Those two conditions go hand in hand in a body where cancer can thrive. And so the entire goal of holistic health and healing is to create an environment where cancer cannot thrive,
Yeah.
is to empower your body to function at an optimal level where healing happens naturally, right? It's just
Mm.
a byproduct of health is rapid healing. So people get, they can really get caught up in doing the physical stuff, right? Doing the therapies, exercising, eating, eating well. But then they can inadvertently ignore the mental, emotional, and spiritual side of health,
Yeah.
which affects your physical body. So it all has to be addressed.
Yeah.
That's the point I'm trying to make here. You cannot ignore that part. And if your listeners leave with one thing, only one thing I've said, I hope it's that you've got to forgive the people who've hurt you. It will let you out of the pain,
Mm.
right? You can release yourself from the prison of pain with forgiveness.
Yes, and I'm glad you picked that up again because I was going to come back to it when you were mentioning the other factors because you mentioned it a couple of times throughout the conversation as well. That idea to forgive, and also this idea of mental and emotional traumas and stuff that are going on inside of us that maybe we're aware of or not that are trapped. Again, it all has an impact on our physiology, on our well being, on everything. And just quickly, what did that forgiveness practice look like for you?
Yeah, it's really easy. Forgiveness sounds hard, but it's
Mm,
actually pretty easy. Um, So if you just make some time to sit down, right, and think through your life and revisit the painful memories, because you've got a filing cabinet in your brain where you've got the painful memories stored, right?
mm,
People that have hurt you, hurt your feelings, abused you, neglected you, abandoned you, cheated you, lied to you, all of it, right? People have hurt you. So as you revisit those memories one by one. And I think it helps to do it chronologically, right? You think about
mhm,
like, what's the earliest memory I could have of like a kid being mean to me on the playground, right? Like kindergarten or something,
yeah.
like calling me stupid or something, right? But one by one, revisit those painful memories. And as they come up, you just In that moment, I would just say, okay, God, you know what this person did. You know how I feel about it. And I'm choosing to forgive them and I'm letting it go. I'm giving it to you. They're all yours. I'm not going to hold on to any resentment or anger toward this person anymore. Right? They're all yours. You can deal with them.
Mm,
And so letting go of the need for justice, right? That's really what forgiveness is. By the way, the encouraging thing is that they will get what they deserve.
mm,
They will. You may never see it or know about it, but it will happen.
yeah.
Okay. And so you can have assurance and have some comfort knowing that no one gets away with anything in
Mm,
this life or the next.
mhm,
Okay. No one ever gets away with anything, only for a time.
yeah.
And so there's people are storing up wrath for themselves. It's coming. So you don't have to be the one. You don't have to be the judge, right? And in that moment of prayer where you say, God, I'm choosing to forgive. Forgiveness is a choice.
Mm,
I'm choosing. I'm letting it go. I'm giving it to you. And I'm asking you to bless them. I'm asking you to have mercy on this person who hurt me. That is even harder, right?
mhm.
It's easy, but it's hard. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
hard because you don't want to, right?
Yeah, because people think, oh, that means I'm saying it's okay. It's okay
Yeah.
what you did. I'm agreeing, or I'm saying I'm letting you off the hook. But
Right.
what you're talking about is, we're letting ourselves off the hook because we're the
Yes.
ones carrying it. That other person may never know. And again, what we carry within, what we're constantly feeling, will express in some way. So
They're
it's
still on the hook. They're just not on your hook.
exactly. Yeah.
You follow me? They're still on the hook. You're
Yeah.
just saying, okay, I'm taking you off my hook. They're on God's hook. I mean, they're on the karma hook. Like it's
Hmm.
coming. And so, but when you pray that way, when you say, God bless this person, I'm asking you to bless this person. I'm asking you to have mercy on this person that hurt me. He knows you don't want him to, right? That's the beautiful thing. God knows your heart. You don't have to
Mm,
fake it, right? He knows you don't want that, but you're asking for it despite what you really want. And to me, that creates this incredible healing in your heart,
mm,
right? You really open your heart up for God to come in and heal it when you say, I forgive them and I'm asking you to bless this person. Like, even though I hope they get struck by lightning, right?
yeah.
That's what I hope.
But
Is there any way that can happen? You know what I mean? And so I promise you, God will honor that. Like he will honor that and heal you when you ask him to do something that he knows you don't want him to do.
mm,
So that is the secret sauce of forgiveness, right? That's the formula. And so one by one, I did that for every
yeah.
person in my life that hurt me, and I didn't do it all in one sitting.
Yeah.
I would just periodically, right? Periodically, like someone would come to mind in the middle of my day,
Mm,
and I'd be like, "Oh man, gosh, I haven't thought about that person in forever. Yeah, that was really crappy what they did to me. But let's just deal with this right now, right? God, okay." I'm going to forgive him. I've never specifically forgiven this person. So let me just do this right now. Let me just
mm,
step through this. They're all yours officially. So that's the first phase of forgiveness. The second phase is, sometimes those feelings will try to creep back in,
mm,
right? The resentment will try to creep back in. That's normal. And in those moments where it creeps back in, you just have to catch it and say, you know what? I forgave this person, right? I already chose to forgive them, and I'm sticking with my decision.
mm.
And I like to say forgiveness is like a healthy diet. It only works if you stick with it. It only works if you stick with it. You have to be like, nope, I forgave them. If they do a new thing, I'll forgive them for the new thing, right? But I'm not going to let this steal my joy,
Yeah.
right? I'm not going to let this old bitterness and pain and resentment steal my joy.
Mhm.
And so um, you will find a great weight lifted off of you when you forgive the people who've hurt you. God will heal your heart. And sometimes it's instantaneous.
Mm,
You just feel the relief instantly. Sometimes it takes a little time
yeah.
and it's gradual. And you really have to work through it and continue to just give it back to God, right? But either way, this is the way out of the prison of pain, right? You
Mm,
have the key. It's called forgiveness. Just unlock the door, let yourself out.
yeah.
And what that does to you physically is your immune system comes back online,
Yeah.
when you let go of all this anger and the inflammation cools off. And so the same method that I just described for forgiveness, and you might be connecting the dots, that's the same thing with fear, right? Me giving my fear to God
Mhm.
and not being in that state of stress, trusting him, like me catching myself being envious or jealous and say, you know what? I need to practice some gratitude right now. What's good in my life that I
Mm.
can say thank you, God, for, right? Thank you, God, I can get out of bed. Okay, let's start with that.
Mm.
I can see and hear. I can take care of myself. I can feed myself. I've got a wife who loves me. I've got two beautiful children. We have a home.
Mm-hmm.
We have enough money in the bank to pay our next set of bills. We have food. I can do this all day, right?
Yeah.
I have clothing. And so I start counting my blessings and practicing gratitude. And then all of a sudden that envy and jealousy just evaporates, right? Because
Yeah.
I stop focusing on what I don't have that makes me resentful of others. And I start focusing on what I do have, which makes me thankful and grateful and happy. And I
Yeah.
realize how blessed I am, right? I have a gratitude hack. And the gratitude hack is this. Anytime I start to get, we just get full of ourselves and we just get all wrapped up in our own little stupid stuff. But anytime I start to feel like that's happening, I can just stop and say, okay, wait a second. I got to reset. I got to do a little quick reboot here. No matter what's going on in my life that I'm not happy about, I'm irritated about or whatever, I can say, okay, there's someone dying in the hospital right now that would give anything to trade places with me. They would love to have my problems, right? They would
Mm-hmm.
take my problems over their problems. I'm good, all
Yeah.
good, right? That's the hack. And so it just that one, focusing on that one truth, that one reality that shifts your perspective out of selfish, self-centered, ego-driven,
Mm-hmm.
um, an ego-driven state into one that is more grounded in a reality
Mm-hmm.
and more eternal, in a way. Um, and so, yeah, I do that all the time. Like,
Yeah.
and I had to learn to do that during cancer. I mean, that was the most difficult, scariest season of my life. And I had to
Mm-hmm.
start counting my blessings. And I learned how to be happy in the most difficult season of my life by
Despite your
practicing gratitude.
powerful, powerful. And yeah, I love what you shared as well when even when you're talking about forgiveness and that or anything is stick with it. And I think that's the thing when cancer or any disease shows up in our body, it's not our body giving up on us, it's our body's ultimate call for help and support. And like you've spoken about the empowering, we have so much choice, but nothing, it's not going to happen overnight. It's sticking with it, it's keeping going, it's coming back again and again, it's choosing that healthy meal, it's whatever it is each and every time, every single day, moving through the fear, coming back to gratitude, moving through forgiveness again and again and again and again. And it will unravel because, like you say, the body is a self-healing mechanism. It is programmed, it has an intelligence, but it needs our support as well.
That's right. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Mm,
Healing takes time. Most people don't get sick overnight with a chronic disease. It takes
exactly.
years to develop and it can take years to heal. And
Hmm.
you just have to be consistent,
Yeah,
right? You have to change your life and consistently care for yourself in a way that you never have before and
love it.
keep overdosing. Like I was what I call overdosing on nutrition,
Mm,
hyper nourishing, as my friend Dr. Brooke Goldner says, your body and working through the forgiveness, right? And just working through all this life change stuff. That's all good, right? Replacing the bad habits with
yeah,
good habits. And it
that's
all
it.
adds up, right? I like to say small change adds up, right?
Absolutely.
Small change
Absolutely.
over time adds up to big change.
Yeah.
So like anybody can do what I did. I don't have any special powers. I don't have a superior intellect.
Hmm.
Like you don't need a college degree or a high school diploma to do what I did.
Yeah.
Right. All you need is a will to live and the willingness to change your life.
Amazing.
And you can completely divert off of the disease path onto the healthy path and start creating a different future for yourself with your decisions today. So that's why I wrote my book.
Hmm.
I have a few books. I have Chris Beat Cancer, which is my story and what I did to get well. Beat Cancer Daily is a book, a daily devotional that I wrote for people that are on the healing journey
Mm,
for daily inspiration, encouragement, and practical
amazing.
advice, action steps to survive and thrive. And then we just published a cookbook that's all plant-based called Beat Cancer Kitchen, my wife and I, and the recipes are phenomenal. They're
Mm,
so good. And the problem people have is they just, they think eating healthy, it doesn't taste good,
Yeah.
right? They just think, oh, I just like, well, I'm just going to eat raw broccoli and all day, every day. And that's like, no thanks.
Yeah.
But there's so many incredible recipes that you can make with plant food, with fruits and vegetables that you will love, they'll taste great. They're delicious. They fill you up. They satisfy you. They give you energy. And so that's what Beat Cancer Kitchen's all about.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing those. And also, as well, if you want to just touch briefly on your coaching course that you have as well, Square One. And I know you mentioned your website throughout the conversation, but if you want to share it again, and as always, I will link everything as well from the show notes on my website.
Sure. Yeah. chrisbeatcancer.com is my website. I've interviewed dozens and dozens of people who've healed. I've interviewed dozens and dozens of doctors and holistic healing experts, scientists, and researchers. There's so much information there to encourage you and empower you with the tools that you can use to change your life,
Mm.
right? To help yourself. It's all free. And we do have a coaching program called Square One. If you click on the link that says coaching, you can learn more about that. But that's a 10 module video course, and we have a private online support community and a lot of really amazing resources for folks that want to do that want to join our private community and just get intensive encouragement and support. That's available too. So yeah, I've been doing this now for almost 13 years publicly,
Mm.
and I've been a survivor for almost 20. And so, you know, it's incredible to look back and think, wow, how my life was changed so much by
Mm.
my diagnosis. And the very first Bible verse that I thought of that came to mind after my diagnosis was Romans 8:28, which says, we know that God works all things for the good of those who love him and who are called according to his purpose. And, I was like, oh, man, this cancer diagnosis is like, this is terrible. But I'm going to choose to believe that God's going to work it for my good, right? If I believe the Bible is true and that it's God's word, right? Then I got to believe this verse, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't not believe this. So I'm choosing to believe it. And now looking back, it's like, yes,
Yeah.
it was true. He worked it for my good.
Yeah.
And he works all things for the good of those who love him. So no matter what you're dealing with, whatever difficult circumstance in your life is, I just want to encourage you to start believing that God is going to work it for your good. He will. He does that. And so sometimes the greatest blessings in our life come out of adversity.
Totally. But again, it takes our input as well to make that decision. And I don't think so, but I was just going to ask, would you change any of it?
Yeah, I wouldn't, because my life is so great. It's
Mm.
wonderful. I'm so blessed in life to have a wife and two beautiful children, and to be able to share my story and encourage
Mhm.
people and do what I've been able to do. I wouldn't go back and change any of it. If I could go back and talk to myself, I would probably try to encourage myself more, right? And
Mm.
say, don't be afraid, it's going to be okay, right?
Mm.
Stay the course. But I'm very happy with the decisions I've made along the way. And cancer changed me for the better.
Mm.
This is something that I talk about in my books,
Amazing.
is like, your life can actually be better after cancer than it was before. And cancer feels like your life's over. And if you have a diagnosis, start thinking differently. That, you know what? This could be the best thing that's ever happened to you. It changes your perspective. It resets, your entire perspective on life, really.
Mhm.
It makes you acutely aware of what really matters, what's really important, and what's not important.
Yeah.
It forces you to face your fears and your flaws and your failures, forces you to forgive yourself and forgive the people who've hurt you, right? To clean up your act. you know,
Mm.
it just, it's this incredible catalyst for change. It's a divine tap on the shoulder, right? That's what it is. It's a divine tap on the shoulder. And the
Love
message is,
that.
the way you're living is killing you. But there's good news, because you can change the way you're living, and you
Love
can change your life and have a better life than you had. And so, yeah, there's so many blessings that have come out of that for me. And I see it over and over for many people. The worst thing that I see is when cancer is going to change you, right? It's going to change you,
that.
and it can change you for the better or for the worse.
Mm-hmm.
And how it changes you is up to you. And the saddest thing, the most troubling thing or distressing thing that I see is when cancer changes someone for the worse, right? When they become more angry, more bitter, more resentful, right? They actually refuse to change their life, and they just let themselves get beat up and brutalized and suffer. And that's really hard. It's really hard to watch a person go down that path, and some do, and everyone has to choose their own path. But generally, I see more people who call cancer a gift or a blessing, right, than who refer to it as a curse. Even those who end up passing away, many of them will say it was a blessing because it changed their life and they were able to reconcile and forgive, and good things happened despite of that. So anyway, we have this incredible community, and I want to make sure that people understand, like, it doesn't matter. You can do everything your doctor says, right? We still will love on you and support you. My message is not, don't do chemo, right? That's not my message. My message is not like, don't go to the doctor. Find a doctor that supports you, that will support your decisions, that'll work with you. Absolutely. Whether or not you do the treatments is up to you, and you should download my 20 questions for your oncologist guide so you can really make a good decision. But at the end of the day, my message is there's so much more you can do to help yourself. Healing happens at home. And so, would you like to know what you can do to increase your odds of survival, decrease your odds of ever getting cancer, or decrease your odds of a recurrence? Would you like to know? This is what I'm here to help you to learn and do.
Amazing. And like you say as well, everything that you're sharing is for everybody anyway, because diet, lifestyle, environment, it's all supportive anyway for many different chronic issues and diseases, and that, not just cancer. So they're beneficial across the board. We're never going to be sorry for, as you say, hyper nourishing ourselves. So thank you so much, Chris, for joining today, for being so generous with your time and for sharing. And I just wish you continued success in what you're doing and your message. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Karen. I appreciate being on, and thank you for the opportunity to share my story with your audience. It's been fun.
Thanks for listening. And before you go, I would love to ask you a massive favor. If you enjoyed this episode or any episode of the podcast, I would love for you to leave a short review on Apple Podcasts to help it grow. If you could do that, I would greatly appreciate it.